Welcome to a new episode of Manage to Retain, where I talk about issues around business for employees, your customers, recruiting, retention, productivity, and profitability. And I do it with my friends, Sherri and Lou. Listen in, you might get a few tips here on how to do leadership better in your business.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Manage to Retain. I want to jump right into this. Employee engagement. Gosh, I've heard so many blog posts, so many posts, so much talk in the news, in newspapers. Everyone's talking about employee engagement. It keeps recurring. It seems like a really interesting and difficult thing to unravel. Is somebody engaged? Sherri and Lou, you're leadership coaches. You help executives think bigger and better and up-level their leadership level. Has this term employee engagement come up in your conversations?
It certainly has.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it comes up from the employee side. Like, I just don't feel like I'm a part of it. See, there's phrases that you can hear from that perspective that actually give us a hint as to, okay, there's an engagement challenge here. So they're not necessarily going to come to us and say, Lou and Sherri, as an employee in this company, I feel that I'm not engaged. And they don't use that terminology. So we as leaders have to really siphon through that and kind of sift through the weeds a little bit to identify what that looks like.
Yeah, and I'm actually trying to get the graphs here because I'd love to show some of these graphs. And why I want to show these empathy graphs is because I believe with the data that an organization has, this doesn't necessarily need to be so much guesswork as in just stick your finger up in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. There's actually some indicators and symptoms that you can see that'll allow you as a leader to be, I'll say, a little bit more intentional, a little more focused in terms of finding that level of engagement. I'd like to share my screen.
Sure.
And if I can click the right buttons here. All right. So can you all see what I have on screen here?
Yes, sir.
So some fictional names that we've added to some real data. So we've taken data from a company, real people, and actually just changed the names out for protection of those people involved, confidentiality of those people. And let me read you through what we're looking at here. So anyone who hasn't seen this empathy graph, as we call it, they haven't seen it before, they know what's actually happening. So I'm going to start here off to the right-hand side. Just like in school, when we were in grade school or in high school, middle school, we got tests and we got graded on report cards, usually from 0 to 100. And this overall score tells you, in this case, Ethan Diana, how he's doing on a scale of that 0 to 100. 64. That doesn't necessarily mean bad or good so much as it just kind of gives you somewhat of a relative range. And this kind of breaks it down into all the different components. But here's what I really want to focus on is this graph, this empathy graph. And let me start out with, if you were to get an A+ in think of each one of these KPIs here as a subject. If you were to get an A+ in each one of those subjects, this blue area, which represents Ethan, would be completely blue. And now you can all of a sudden start to see a little bit about Ethan just because his blue area is not covering everything. But there's one other thing, and that is that gray area in the back, that dark gray, which is the average employee. So you can see how Ethan compares to the average employee and where he is being really effective or he's kind of getting closer to the A+ and doing really well in the tests, and the areas where maybe there's not so much. So I'll just give you a quick overview of some of these things here. You'll see that this reservice percentage. So this is for a field service and trade company. They actually drive out in vehicles to go service their customers. You want your technicians or employees in this particular role not to have to go back and revisit a customer to reapply or do the service, right? They should do it one time. Coming back means that there's technical things that they have not done, and there may not be some mastery there.
Right.
And also you see this high completion percentage. There's lots of times where Ethan, in this case, is below average in terms of the ability to complete the jobs that are given to him. And the service value for each one of those appointments is a little bit below average. I'd love to hear from you, Sherri and Lou. Looking at this, just by looking at this graph, can you get a sense of Ethan and who he is in this organization, how he kind of sort of measures up. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. A couple of things on here. So that reservice piece. One of the things that there was a term that was used in my day of service management and service directing was, we called it first call resolution, right? So in this case, it's the first call resolution that's suffering, and then you've got the high complete rate. And I am willing to bet you, Vinay, that those two are related, right? Those two outcomes are related because of the completion and of course the one call or first call resolution. Just wanted to make that point. The reason being is I don't even know this person, and immediately I were able to see where these two things join. But what does that do for us? Right off the top, we were talking about engagement a little bit, and it starts with us as a leader purposely and intentionally engaging with an employee to identify where their viewpoint is. What are they seeing that we're not seeing? Or vice versa, what are we seeing that they're not seeing? And we can't do that without that type of engagement to at least begin a conversation. But it's not limited there, but that's where in this case, I believe it needs to begin. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think it all starts with a conversation, but at least we have the objective material to say otherwise to start the conversation.
Right.
You know, I want to throw a couple more dimensions here because we've got some other things, and I want to kind of demonstrate this idea that as you get a bigger, more holistic picture, you start to really understand how Ethan shows up every day at work and kind of what might be floating through his mind as he walks out that door that day. So high appointment service. So the number of appointments is desirable for the company because they believe that you have more appointments per day. That's a good thing. So he is kind of at the top of the stack here in terms of appointment served. He's 98 out of 100. So he's doing a lot of jobs. Low subscription cancels. So he is doing, you can see low subscription cancels. He's a 95 out of 100 here, right? Doing really well here. So lots of appointments, a lot of people who are not canceling on them. You can see low not service rate. So he's actually getting to those appointments. I'm just kind of getting the sense that this person is just a machine that is just going, the Energizer bunny. And when I start to see that makes me start to think a little bit about sort of the mental health of this individual, right? This person is just cranking that wheel again and again and again. Get up, make the donuts, and go to sleep, and get up early in the morning to make the donuts again. And that might be leading to, especially this, to some degree, this makes me believe this person is kind of like a superhero in the organization in terms of how they're doing. They may not be getting the attaboys for doing it. Do you see that same kind of story evolving here?
That's highly probable. And there's a couple of questions though that this really, along with that, brings to mind here. While Ethan has this high appointment service, meaning he has some of the most appointments that he has serviced, but yet his complete percentage is low. So perhaps there is something that as leaders we've got to question as to what the measurements mean. Like, what do we mean by completed percentage? If he's going to these appointments, and does he understand? Does Ethan understand what that looks like? Okay? What you're looking for? That's one thing I see. The second thing I see that's clear to me as day is that people love him. His clients, the people that he's servicing, love him because he doesn't have any cancellations. Their subscriptions are, and if anything, he has more appointments. So people are asking for him. Clients are asking for him. So perhaps even yet, maybe he's in the wrong position. Maybe service is not the spot for him. Maybe employee engagement or sales. Who knows, right? But these are the types of questions we need to begin asking.
Yeah, and let's bring it back to this term. I mean, this issue of engagement. Would you say this person is engaged? I mean, I think the word engaged can be used lots of different ways here, right? Would you say? Well, I mean, break that down for me. How do you think this? Do you think this person's engaged?
Yeah, and it's a very broad question, right? Because there is multiple levels of engagement. He's engaged with his clients. He's engaged with those he's servicing.
Yeah.
Is he engaged with the full picture of what his role is? Most likely not.
Yeah.
If that was the case, he would balance out his skill set here, because all we'd have to do is balance that out to create more of a well-rounded blue area, if you will, in his skill set. But so that engagement is there is a gap there. What is it that Ethan's really doing? I'm willing to bet you, but if we sit down, Ethan, and say, hey, why don't you tell me what the objective of your role is? And we hear him tell us his objective, it's going to be different. There's going to be a gap between that and what ours as a leader is. And that begins that process of understanding the disengagement that he has. He's got to be working ridiculous hours.
Yeah, and so there's if this has been, I mean, if this is the person who's been on board with the company for 6 weeks, that's one thing. If this is someone who's been with the company for 6 years, this person is going to be. I would throw out the word jaded. Right, this person is jaded. They're just punching a clock and waiting for the next best thing to occur. So, as a leader, if I were to see this based on sort of what's been happening and evolving in this conversation, just by looking at this data that's already within the organization, I would say, gosh, how much do I value Ethan? Because if I do have value for Ethan and it's expensive to go try to find an unknown quantity from the outside to replace Ethan, gosh, I need to have a conversation with Ethan and maybe just start to tell him, hey, look, I really value what you're doing. Let's get a little more alignment here, because I don't want your stress level to kind of be, I don't want you to boil over, because it sounds like he might be a candidate for that.
Yes. 100%. I mean, and perhaps not as much, but maybe, because you're right. Because I mean, if you look at it, when your production suffers, seems like the relationship part of what he does is okay, but the service part of it's suffering. So there absolutely is most likely something like that happening here.
So let's look at someone else, just because it'll kind of give us a little bit of contrast here, and I'll pick someone else. So Isabella, right? See a different graph here. So let's talk about sort of the above average areas. So low subscription cancels, high appointments service. I'm actually not quite sure where that blank came from. High appointment service is a value, so they're making a lot of revenue on each one of these stops. High completion percentage, so they're doing those jobs properly, and the low number of cancels is pretty good. So where they're struggling, and you can see a couple of reds here, customer cancels. They have cancels, but the rate is not high. So it looks like they may not have as many jobs as other people have, as many jobs as someone else. So the number looks higher compared to the average, but they don't have as many appointments, right? So it's not an equitable distribution here. Low not service rate. So they've got a bunch of jobs they're not getting to. So they're actually running out of maybe time to be able to produce that. And they're low reservice percentage. They're reservicing a bunch of jobs. As I go through this, I've got an idea, but I'm kind of curious. What are you all seeing here as you read through this? Different person than Ethan.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking that Ethan is someone who's tenured. Isabella, one of two things, is brand new, and not being managed well or serviced well or led well, and or just doesn't like what she does.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, or she's 1 foot out the door already and looking for another job.
She's not sold. She's not bought in yet.
So let's come back to this question. Would you say she's engaged? And I think in both of those cases, she has either, if she's brand new, she hasn't been engaged enough, right? On the other side, if she's actually got a 1 foot out the door and she's actually actively looking out there, yeah, she might be half checked out at this point. If you want to rescue this before you get that resignation letter, here's the call sign for it. That's right. If you're, and right now is not the time in many industries to be risking losing employees that could be valuable, right? This is not the time to do that. It is time for us to identify what this looks like. And Isabella is one that needs attention. Yeah, the stats that I've heard is on average, if you lose someone, and I think these stats have all been thrown out there and there's lots of different places, but generally speaking, when you lose someone, it's probably about 6 months to find someone who kind of slots back in. Be a little bit less, a little bit more, but kind of in that sort of time frame. And it's probably going to take another 6 months before they start to unlearn what they had in their last place and those old behaviors and learn the new behaviors.
Right.
Where they start to get to full production. So here's an opportunity to prevent a year of pain.
Right. Or even the bottom line and the revenue of how much you have to, that you've already invested in this person, the onboarding process, the training, that from the initial start. And then now on the way out, I mean, there's just a lot, I mean, revenue wise at what you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, well, what can we do to actually turn this around?
Mm-hmm.
As long as the other person is bought in, or at least have this communication to see the bigger picture. But you never know. You have to, again, it all comes back to communication and finding out what this person, what values to that person. Maybe if this isn't the right fit, maybe this isn't the right fit at all for the job that this person is doing. Or it could be, no, I'm just not being challenged enough. This is actually not, and maybe I'm just unclear of what my duties are because I don't have the support.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be someplace simple as that.
Yeah.
Be like, I don't have the support. And
yeah. And
but if you notice what we're doing here, we're already engaging in the thought process with Isabella when she's not here. This has to happen as leaders. We're already beginning this engagement in this discussion. That's what leaders have to do. We've got to engage in the discussion. We've got to engage in the thought so that the thought then brings about the intellectual connection, then brings about the emotional connection, that brings about the action to help solve this problem.
And that is the trifecta.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop sharing because I would love to kind of wrap up with maybe some summary and final thoughts here. You all teach 10 principles. As a leader, being able to kind of start to have some of those forethoughts by looking at these graphs that are based on the data that's already resident from the software in your organization, you can kind of get ahead of the curve here a little bit. What of those 10 principles, do you think there's one or two principles that you think really apply here that kind of tease out what is possible here?
Mm-hmm. I'm going with the reflect principle. Now, these 10 principles that we believe that every leader must follow to lead with influence, one of those is the reflect principle. And reflection as a leader, if you're not reflecting, and when I say reflecting, that doesn't mean, all right, that was a good decision. All right, that was a bad decision. No. Reflection comes with action, right? That means at the end of the day, during the day, beginning of the day, whatever works best for you is to sit back and say, what decisions did I make? What actions did I do that worked? What didn't work? How can I become better tomorrow? By doing that reflection, in this case specifically today, you can then identify how we can engage with these employees, these specific ones, these two we talked about. How can we engage? What can we do different that we haven't done before, that may stretch us a little bit, but we can do different to re-engage these employees to identify where we as leaders can come in and add value.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of coming back and inspecting, reflecting on what you've done, how you can be more effective as that leader. I think there's some real power there.
Yeah.
If you'd like to see a free assessment like this, where you can see what's happening with your employees, check out the comments and you'll see an assessment that will give you a graph like this. And you can actually send it out to all of your employees to find out where they are, where their head is at. It's a free assessment, but you'll get graphs like this that'll show you what you can pay attention to next so that you can reflect properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sherri and Lou, thank you so much for your time and your attention.
You bet. Thank you, Vinay, for having us again.
Thank you.
See you.